Saturday is the 75th anniversary of the Hartford Circus Fire. 168 people died at the circus that day, and 5 people lost to the fire remain unidentified. And now, with modern DNA technology, a family whose grandmother disappeared that day may finally get answers about what happened to her.
Someone shouted, "There's fire in the tent." The circus orchestra switched to playing Stars and Stripes, the march Stars and Stripes Forever, which was the code that there was something disastrous happening.
July 6, 1944. The Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey's circus was in town.
Hartford was a really industrial town. There was a lot of industry happening. It was a really vibrant city, and this was a great summer afternoon entertainment.
It was a hot, muggy day, and 7,000 people crowded underneath the tent to see the show.
What a better way to spend a summer day.
It was a matinee. The Lions were the opening act, and as the trapeze artists were in the air, something went horribly wrong.
Animals in their cages were already being moved into position, and so they ended up blocking the exits.
The tent, coated in a mixture of paraffin wax and gasoline, a waterproofing technique at the time, was devoured by flames within 10 minutes.
There are lots of reports of people having to slash through the canvas to make their own way out, and adults pulling people through these holes.
168 people died that day.
The armory, which is downtown, was used as the morgue, and so people had to go and walk through and try to identify their loved ones.
It was a big deal because they were coming into the city.
2 of the bodies pulled out of the rubble: Leslie Choquette's grandmother and grandfather.
And the last thing that my mother got to hear my grandfather Frank say is, "Once I push you out of here, you keep running and don't look back." Here he is.
At the Circus Fire Memorial in the north end of Hartford, trees lined the spot where the tent stood. Here, Leslie describes how her grandfather, a Simsbury volunteer firefighter, saved her mother and her aunt. It was his first and last act of duty.
My mother never got over feeling guilty that she survived and her mother and father did not.
But not everyone tracked down the fate of their loved ones in the aftermath of the fire.
And there still are people who are unidentified, and bodies that were never matched to individuals.
My grandmother was one of them.
Sandy Sumrow's grandmother, Grace Fifield, was last seen at the circus that day, but her body was never found. Now, 75 years later, Connecticut's chief medical examiner wants to exhume the 2 female bodies of the 5 who remain nameless. Comparing Sandy's DNA to the remains will hopefully give her answers.
My mother didn't have closure, her sister didn't have closure, her brother didn't have closure.
The case to exhume the bodies is working itself through the courts now, and tomorrow night we'll tell you about another family mystery discovered 75 years later. For an interactive look at the artifacts and additional interviews, visit NBCConnecticut.com. I'm Isa Gutierrez, NBC Connecticut Investigates.